call to order the September meeting of the New Ulm Airports Commission. The time is 4:04, and I will move for an election of officers. We are still serving with temporary officers. We need to elect a chair. Anybody want to volunteer? I'm going off the commission at the end of the year, so it should be somebody who's going to be staying on.
So, Mr. Chair, we will need a chair, vice chair, and a secretary.
That is correct, thank you. We have to get the chair first before we can move on.
Yep.
Joe, is mine up at the end of the year as well?
2022, so you got a couple years yet. So if you want to, Mr. Chair, if you want to wait until we have a
Full commission, we could do
commission.
that, but we
Yep.
need a motion for that.
Yeah, need a motion for that, and then I can take care of the meeting minutes.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to table the election of officers till further meeting with more attendance.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion is carried. Approval of the minutes from September 10th, 2019. They've been on the computer, if you wish to look at them briefly, and then I would call for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I second.
All those saying aye, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion is carried. Old business.
Mr. Chair, if I can interrupt, I would like to jump to new business number 5.1,
We can do
FBO
that.
search background and update, just so we can allow the Jerry Redmond from North Star Aviation, so he can be on
Oh,
his way
okay.
here.
Certainly. Yes, go ahead.
Slight background on this is New Ulm Flight Service terminated their contract with the city at the end of May. And ever since the end of May, we've been running the airport without an FBO provider out at the airport, basically providing fuel and maintaining the grounds. On Friday of last week, I received a proposal for FBO services from North Star Aviation. Jerry Redmond is here from North Star Aviation to speak on that. If you choose to do so, ask him any questions he may have. The proposal was included within your packet. And Jerry and I have met probably 3, 4, 5 times to discuss operations and give him tours of the facility throughout the time since, probably since May to a couple weeks ago. So very productive talks, and I think the main thing that North Star was waiting for is make sure the financials work out for him and that it's a good business plan for him to jump over here to New Ulm. So with that, I will ask Jerry if he wants to come up, say any words.
Please do. Thank you.
You can come up to the
You're over
podium.
there.
And then just you come around, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we all get muffled a little bit
Yep.
with the mask on.
So just name and address for the record. You can give North Star's
Jerry
address.
Redmond with North Star Aviation. I'm the vice president there in Mankato. We run the Mankato Airport and FBO services, and then we are also the contractor for the flight training for the University of Mankato there. We employ roughly 75 people out at the Mankato Airport, providing from line service to maintenance and avionics. And then obviously the big chunk of it is with flight instructors and support staff for the university. We are, it's been rather busy. I mean, obviously with the COVID-19, it threw a wrench in, I think, everyone's plans a little bit. Like I said, Joe mentioned is we've been talking probably for 3 months if not more, 4. And just making sure that, we ended up with the shutdown in Mankato and what this looked like for us financially. But I should back up a little bit. So we run the Mankato location, and we are also in Bowling Green, Ohio, for Bowling Green State University with another flight school only, and then down in Springfield, Missouri with another flight school. So those are our 3 locations. All 3 we employ, I think is stated in here, right around 165 people between all 3 locations. We fly out of Mankato. We fly roughly 26 airplanes right now with flight training. And we have 20 in Bowling Green and another 10 in Springfield. So we don't move planes around a lot, but we do pull them from certain locations. Specifically, if we have more of a robust maintenance department up in Mankato than the other locations, so we will utilize that for any long-term projects and stuff like that. So that's a little bit of the history of North Star and where we're at and where we've grown to over the last 4 or 5 years. And when this came about, we always thought it would be a nice little, pickup for us to have. I think we can complement the location of it, by being close with staff, whether it's on the maintenance or line support. We see some positive things over here in New Ulm and see it could be part of our overall program. We seem to get a little tighter and tighter airfield or airspace in Mankato, and we see that might be, an opportunity someday in the future. Do we start, bringing some more of the flight ops over to this direction? We have in the last probably year, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but we do with certain flight operations now, touch and goes and stuff like that. We go to Waseca or New Ulm or some other location. So
I grade them every time they go over. I'm a former pilot with the airline, so
Yeah.
I watch them.
So it's just in our enrollment, one of the questions we had was what's enrollment look like for this fall, and some of the things we were holding off on, and it continues to pick up in Mankato. It's a good solid program there. So it's I think, like I said, we're excited to have an opportunity if we can come over here, and like I said, we can coordinate with line. We see how we could maybe step up services a little bit more, bringing in a fuel truck, bringing on avionics services. Maybe it's for us to have a vehicle there that we have to send somebody over for a day. We can do it to repair somebody's plane.
How many staff do you plan to have here every day, regular basis?
Obviously we would start out with line right away. 2 of our mechanics actually live over here. So it would be a matter of, do we try to schedule them 1 or 2 days here a week? It's going to be what demand is out there at this point.
Will you have an office person out there in order to coordinate if somebody wanted to rent the car, for instance?
Yes, so what we do in Mankato is we've actually got our staff, we cross-train for front desk and line support.
Okay.
On that. So they're trained in fueling operations. They'll run the fuel truck, but they will also sit by and do invoicing and scheduling stuff and writing that, taking orders. So we try to, run as lean as we can, but still have all the services we can offer, and we're starting to plan for what that looks like. Because, we're leaning more towards, 5-6 days a week. I mean, you get your GA people in on Saturdays and stuff like that. So what do we try to coordinate that. One thing we do is by having students, is we always have the students come in and train for line and front desk applications for maybe it's at night or weekends. So we've got the staff, we've got the resources. You got these students that love aviation and want to work at an airport while they're going through their training. So we feel it's a compliment that the location is we can, bring employees over here without an issue.
Okay.
Our maintenance right now, we're running in Mankato. We have a director of maintenance who actually lives over here. Our quality assurance director is actually out of the Twin Cities but drives down or flies down. We have a purchasing agent. She lives in Eagle Lake. And then we run an avionics manager And then we've got another 6 staff underneath that support those people. So we've got a pretty solid maintenance program over there.
Okay.
A couple of them are just part-timers, which works. One of the part-timers, like I said, lives in New Ulm here, that he's willing to, I think, take his toolbox out there.
Yep.
So I think we can try to build back what was, what needs to
What
be.
was here
Yeah, exactly.
at one stage.
I
Okay.
think, when I've been talking with Joe here on, fuel suppliers, and I know as you guys made the switch, we'll start honoring, Shell contract purchasing. We're working with them on, bringing on another fuel truck that would be kind of part them, part us. But I think that's what's going to get the jet fuel sales, because as a professional pilot, do you want to step off and, maybe get a little jet fuel on you or smell on you, you want someone else to do it. And I think that would really help promote that in the area. So,
I remember those times when I would utter a slight expletive if something,
Yeah.
when I had to do it myself, but that was a long time ago.
so and I know you guys don't, I think you were, what, 40,000 gallons?
Yep.
We pump basically 40,000 gallons a month over there between jet and avgas. So you can see the volume difference, but still it's customer service. It doesn't matter if it's 100 gallons or 1,000 gallons, it's still customer service. So I guess that's our approach on it.
Well, good, thank you. Gentlemen, do you have any other questions?
So, Mr. Chair, if there are no more questions, I guess from the commission, if it's acceptable to you, I would be looking for a recommendation that the city council would accept the proposal from North Star Aviation. And we'll,
I move that the commission accepts the proposal from North Star Aviation for the FBO for New Ulm.
I'll second that.
All right. Rather than say that again, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much, sir.
thank you, Jerry. I'll be in contact later
Yeah.
this week with you.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Yep, thank you.
And Mr. Chair, we can jump back to the old business now, if that's all right with you.
Yes, that would be fine. So, old business 4.1, verbal update on the airport master plan. Brian, would you care to open up the discussion?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Brian Page. I'm with Mead and Hunt. We are the airport consultant. I've been working for the city for the past 18 years now for everything that's happening or soon to be happening out at the airport. So what I wanted to do is, it's been a while since we've met, and just to provide an update, the wheels have been turning ever since last fall when we got together last. We were hoping to get together this spring, but then with the latest events with COVID-19, that kind of threw a monkey wrench into that, and we kind of went into hibernation there for a bit. But rest assured, we are keeping the momentum going on this. It's very important to the city to keep this process going forward of mapping out what the airport is going to look like now and well into the future. And that's where we're at. We thought it would be important to make mention to the commission. We're kind of at a crossroads right now where we're going to be taking the information that we've already developed as part of the master planning process. And we have a meeting set up with the Federal Aviation Administration and also Minnesota Department of Transportation Office of Aeronautics. That meeting is actually going to be scheduled for the 22nd of September. And that meeting, the purpose of that meeting is to kind of get the stakeholder agencies up to speed on what we've been doing, what we're up to, and where we're going with the overall project. So by all means, everyone is welcome. If they'd like to participate in that meeting, there will be a call-in number. So if you're interested, certainly talk to Joe and we can certainly get you that line if you'd like to sit in and just listen, or if you'd like to be an active participant, whatever you decide. So just
What
let us.
time is that, if we're able to? Do you
I'm
have a
not sure.
specific time yet?
1 o'clock, I think. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure. 1 o'clock, I think we have it scheduled for up to 2 hours.
Okay.
So if the commission is interested, we can certainly share that information if you'd like to sit in and kind of hear real time, I guess, some of the
I will have
information.
to
But
see what my schedule is for
Okay.
that, so, but yes,
Okay.
possibly, yes.
Mr. Chair, I'll just send out an email to all the commission
Yes,
members.
thank you.
Yeah, that'd be
With
good.
that information.
Okay, what we're hoping to do with the schedule, the anticipated target is to wrap everything up later on this fall, going into the winter, and then hopefully by the spring of 2021, wrap up the master planning process and bring it to a close. It may take a little bit longer depending on agency contact or comments and review and getting everything revised according to their comments. But then as part of that process, if you all recall, perhaps, I guess, you, Mr. Chair, and Tyler, you might remember, I guess, that we talked a little bit about updating the city's zoning. That is also part of that effort and part of that master planning effort. So, not that we need to take action right now, but one of the things that we will need to do and we'll be talking to you about is establishing what they call a joint airport zoning board, or it goes by the acronym of a JASB. That is something that we will need to engage in probably here in the months ahead and determine who those individuals are going to be, because then the next step will be is there's about a 7-step process that we'll have to go through to be able to get the city's zoning updated according to the new standards.
Okay. Have there
And
been any moves from outside sources to have zoning altered so that they could build, which would come into that Crosswind runway zoning that we are concerned about?
yes, part of our discussion with the Federal Aviation Administration that's going to happen on the 22nd, that is part of what that discussion is going to be centered around, is to discuss that. What has happened is the state of Minnesota did go through and the legislature did pass an update to the zoning standards, if you would, in the state of Minnesota within the last year. I think it was rolled out in July of 2019, if I remember correctly. It does provide some guidance as to following either two ways. You can either go the standard, Commissioner of Standards route, or you can go a customized approach. The customized approach is a little bit more involved because you are literally customizing those standards as you go. An airport like New Ulm, I think that, in at least my opinion at this point, is it's probably going to go in the direction of the standard approach, with some exemptions that we would be requesting as part of that process. But again, this discussion with the FAA and getting everybody on the same page is really kind of where we're going with that overall process. So I can entertain some questions if there are going to be any, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it over to our Evan Barrett, which can convey the information onto the commission of where we're at today and some of the progress that's been made since the last time we've met.
All right.
So, Evan, it's all yours.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Evan Barrett, and I'm the project manager for the master plan. I believe I presented to you quite a while ago when there was a bit different constitution of the board here, but just wanted to bring you up to speed on where we've been and where we're going, primarily to give you a kind of a taste of what we'll be presenting to the FAA and MnDOT at this meeting on the 22nd. So just so you're aware. Kind of as background, we had established some goals for the master plan at the outset of the project. We have done quite a bit of planning and environmental work for the airport in the past around the runway extension that occurred a number of years ago, as well as a proposed realignment of the Crosswind runway. Now, the airport layout plan that the airport currently has on file with FAA and MnDOT is not up to standard. Standards have changed with the FAA and MnDOT, so a big goal of this is to update that to the current standard so that the airport continues to be eligible for federal and state funding. So in order to do that, we go through a master planning process or exercise where we look at facility needs for the next 20 years. And we're really focusing in on this Crosswind runway as well as the terminal area and your kind of hangar layouts for the future. And of course, as Brian said, part of our contract is to help the city enact a zoning ordinance, and I'll talk about that briefly. So that's the reason we're doing the project. This is a standard master plan process diagram. It just demonstrates how this process is a linear process, and we've already completed several portions of it. So each of the steps represents a chapter in the master plan. We've completed the inventory chapter. We also have a draft forecast chapter that we submitted to FAA, and that's a chapter that needs to be approved by FAA in order for any projects to occur that are based on those forecasts. So we'll be talking about that at our meeting later this month. But really the focus of my remarks today are on the facility requirements and the alternatives, specifically with reference to the Crosswind runway and the terminal area. And then once we select preferred alternatives, we'll update the airport's capital improvement plan and identify any additional steps that will need to occur before any of the projects proposed by the master plan are implemented. And then, of course, update the airport layout plan. So just briefly on the forecasts. So there are basically two key forecasts for an airport like New Ulm. First of all, there's the based aircraft forecast, which you see at the upper right here, and then there's the general aviation operations forecast, which is at the lower left. So standard practice is to evaluate several methodologies and compare those methodologies to the FAA's terminal area forecast. In recent years, whereas in the past the FAA would forecast activity individually for every airport throughout the country, they are now taking an approach with non-tower GA, non-commercial service airports to just project flat activity. And forecasts are particularly challenging at an airport like New Ulm because there's no tower to count the operations. The based aircraft information is only as good as what's been put in the system over time. And so we ended up, in order to gather more information, we conducted a user survey. So we collected a lot of information that way. And basically what we found is that we see, that kind of flat projection for activity at the airport. Pretty much no reason to deviate from that forecast. So that's what we're recommending that we go forward with, is just continued operations and based aircraft at similar levels to today. So in terms of the facility requirements, this is the terminal area. So we've evaluated this in terms of the current FAA standards. So as you'll see on this diagram, there's a red line. I know it's difficult to read, but there are some non-compliance issues with taxiway object-free areas in the terminal area. So we're developing alternatives to address those non-standard conditions. And again, that'll be addressed as part of the airport layout plan, which once you have that on file, then you can proceed with projects to address those nonconformities. Most of them just involve adding additional pavement along the current taxi lane edges in the T-hangar area. As you can see here, the apron basically in front of the airport terminal and some of the larger box hangars is currently designed for Group 2 aircraft. So it can basically accommodate small to medium-sized corporate jets, whereas the area up around the T-hangars on the north is designed for Design Group 1 aircraft, which are typically your smaller single piston engine type aircraft. One of the goals of the master plan is to identify a future development plan for corporate jets and larger corporate aircraft. So what we're developing right now are some alternatives for adding additional hangar development on the south side of the terminal area that would accommodate those size aircraft. So here is a diagram depicting a kind of a first phase to expanding the corporate jet area, and then ultimately that could be expanded for additional hangar development. Now, what you'll see just south of that future development is what's called a building restriction line for the Crosswind runway. So basically that would be kind of your ultimate build out if the Crosswind runway were to stay where it is. So there are some limitations that runway imposes on the development potential in the hangar area. So we are looking at a number of alternatives for the turf Crosswind runway in order to relocate it, not only for future landside development purposes, but also to address incompatible uses on the northeast end of the runway. So the blue area you can see here is called a runway protection zone. And right now there is a subdivision that falls within that runway protection zone. There are also commercial and other residential properties within what would be considered the safety zones under a future zoning ordinance that is according to the MnDOT standard. So right now, that runway is not zoned. And so we're trying to identify a future alignment for the runway that resolves any land use incompatibility issues. So a couple of the options we've been looking at are shown here. And so we designed these with a couple things in mind. First of all, maintain the current runway length of just over 2,400 feet on that turf runway. Eliminate any conflicts with that runway protection zone. Again, that's the blue area, by moving Highland Avenue and any property east of Highland Avenue out of the RPZ. And also minimize any impacts associated with land use zoning and land acquisition that may be required to achieve any of these alternatives. So that's how we design them. And I have an evaluation matrix on the next slide, which selects 927 as the preferred option. This is basically a modified version of a runway realignment concept that has gone through a number of permutations over the years. And this is our latest version of it, which attempts to minimize the cost while also addressing the issues with the existing alignment. So this summarizes some of the evaluation criteria, and I apologize if it's difficult to read. But basically, we have three different alternatives. Number one is leave the runway as is. Number two is to rotate it slightly clockwise to a 624 alignment. And then the third alternative is to have that east-west 927 alignment. So the 927 alignment, which I said on the last slide, was our recommended alternative. It has the best wind coverage. So basically, it provides the most all-weather utility for the airport. It affects the fewest private parcels by that future standard zoning that Brian mentioned. It has, of course, there'd be more land acquisition with that in order to move the runway than there would be to acquire the land within the RPZs for the existing runway, but not a whole lot additional. And the cost to acquire that land would be less than the existing runway because that land is not currently zoned for residential use. So there would be $1 million in construction cost to relocate that runway, but some of that will be offset by the reduced land acquisition cost estimate. So on balance, that is the best option. So we'll be talking with FAA and MnDOT about their thoughts on moving forward with that option for the airport layout plan and the future capital improvement plan for the airport.
Is there a county road that gets affected by that 927? Because at
No.
one stage, we were looking at actually moving the airport further.
Right.
For the
So
west.
I just flipped back to that option. So the version I think that I showed you, Mr. Chair, for a previous study that we did, shifted that runway significantly to the west.
Correct. And I
Such
can't
that
tell
it,
from that.
such that it would have affected, I think, a township road out in Milford Township.
Yep.
And that option actually showed the eastern threshold of the runway being west of the primary runway.
Okay.
Whereas this option actually maintains a crossing configuration for the two runways such that that would not become an issue in the future.
Okay, thank you.
The last slide I have here before I go to next steps is basically just to depict the affected jurisdictions for the zoning process that we are under contract to do. So the likely constituents of the Joint Airport Zoning Board would be the City of New Ulm, Milford Township, Seigel Township, and Cottonwood Township, I believe, as well as Brown County. There might be others depending on how this ends up looking, but those would be the constituent members of that JASB as we have it currently laid out. So next steps, again, as Brian said, in 2 weeks we'll be meeting with FAA and MnDOT to discuss our recommendations. And then through the fall and winter, we'll be finalizing the master plan, updating the airport layout plan. And then late winter, early spring, we'll submit all of that to the city, FAA, and MnDOT for review and approval. So with that, I'll conclude and stand for questions.
Thank you, Evan. Gentlemen, do you have any questions before Evan leaves the hot seat, as it were?
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
You'll have to excuse me for a minute, gentlemen. My computer just decided to shut down, and I'm trying to get, there we go. Maybe not. No. Joseph, may I ask your help? This went up to there.
Let's see what I can do here.
That's the wrong one. That's what, that came up, okay. It should be, yeah, we have it. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep. I gotta go into the,
Maybe not.
it's working on
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So do we need to have a vote to have that introduced or
No,
anything?
it's just a verbal update, Mr.
Go
Chair.
with that. Okay, I just
Yep.
wanted to make sure. 4.2, the update on the 2020 hangar area pavement reconstruction project.
I think I can take this one for you, Brian, but,
Okay.
so we just received the grant from the FAA today. So it's looking like the reconstruction project, may be delayed until next spring just because of, schedules and weather and whatnot, but, the grant has been received. They'll get executed in the next couple of days and we'll get that back to the FAA. And then, it's looking as if it'll be next spring when construction
All right.
starts, so.
See, for the record, how much was that grant?
I guess I do have to call you up.
Have a number? It was 418,000 something, but I'm not sure.
Correct. That was the federal portion. The state portion is about that again.
Okay.
The state is participating where the Federal Aviation Administration grant leaves off. So there's a fairly sizable state grant to accompany the federal grant that you already have. So, and we are looking, Joe, to possibly add some additional work.
Yep.
I don't know if you wanted to talk to the commission a little bit about that. but
Yep.
There would be some additional work surrounding some of the future hangar development.
Yep, we'll get to that in 5.4.
All right.
Okay.
Just a couple items away here.
All right, thank you. We see 5.3, since we're jumping.
Yep.
Receive an update on the status of the airport fuel system.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I felt it was important for you guys to get an update as to what happened, why we didn't have fuel for a period of time out at the airport. So when New Ulm Flight Service vacated the airport grounds, it was around that same time we found the tanks needed to be cleaned. So we contracted with Zoll Equipment out of Mankato to have them come service our tanks, clean the tanks. Last thing the city wanted to do was sell dirty fuel, since we took over the fuel sales. So there were some delays in that process, just with Zoll getting into the tanks, and nothing ever seems to go according to plan, and those types of situations. So Zoll was out, they got the tanks cleaned. In the meantime, we had new filters and everything like that installed on the pumps, and I received a couple proposals for fuel vendors to offer fuel. It's uncharted territory for the city to be in the fuel selling business out at the airport, so we ended up working with Titan Aviation Fuels and their salesmen to get the pumps up and running to their standards for the Shell fuel that they sell. We entered into a short-term lease or a contract with them. I believe it's a 3-month contract for fuel sales, in the hopes that in the meantime we'd have an FBO provider come out. So with that, and there were some other pump upgrades that they requested. So we have Zoll lined up to do new hoses on the fueling pumps, along with a water detection system on the Jet A fuel pump as well. So those items will get taken care of here in the future. So we were without fuel for quite some time. I know some pilots had multiple questions of what's happening and things like that. So that's kind of the short version of the update. So yeah, we are, the city's officially, I guess, in the fuel selling business, and everything's been running fine since we got all that work completed.
All right, thank you. 5.4, receive and consider a proposed lease agreement for the construction of a hangar for Travel Direct LLC.
Mr. Chair, this lease agreement is unique to New Ulm in that we don't have any privately owned hangars out at the airport. Travel Direct is the plane holding company for Spexus Incorporated that operates here in town. And they have expressed interest in building their own private hangar on the airport property. So working with Brian Page and the city attorney and some sample lease agreements of that nature from the city of Austin and the city of Faribault, we have drafted the lease that is in your packet today.
Yes, I have read that.
So I guess what we'd be looking for is some recommendation from the commission, if it's acceptable to you, to take that negotiations further and send that lease off to Travel Direct if that's the way the commission wants to go. I think it would be beneficial for the airport to start this process, to have some privately owned hangar space out there. And so corporations or whoever can proceed in that fashion. So they're looking at doing approximately a 50 by 50 hangar out there, and kind of in that area that was shown during Evan's presentation, kind of south of the heater, or hangar number 4, which is that heated hangar that the Lions Club uses for the pancake breakfast.
Thank you. Gentlemen, what are your wishes? Do you wish to proceed with the lease agreement, or at least for its next step? I would entertain a motion if that is the case.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to have the lease agreement for the construction of a private hangar for Travel Direct continue, or at least the negotiations continue.
Yeah, so
All those in
Mr.
favor?
Chair, if I
sorry.
could, before we vote on this, the next steps would be, I'll probably email this off to the personnel at Travel Direct to have them review it.
Okay.
And from then, we will enter kind of the negotiation phase, and the city attorney will be heavily involved in that. And once all parties are kind of on the same page, and then it'll go to city council for final approval.
All right. Gentlemen, we have a motion, slightly amended through Joseph's comments. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion is carried. 5.5, receive and consider a recommendation for an airport courtesy car policy, and there's a fasimile of a airport courtesy car agreement that was in the minutes. That was, yes,
Yep.
that was in the agenda, excuse me.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So after some discussion with the police department, police chief, and the commander over there, they have a couple vehicles that will be decommissioned and no longer used by the police department. And the number of requests that I've received in the last 4 months asking if we have a courtesy car at the airport, I feel that it's something that we need to proceed with out there. We'll
I
start.
was surprised, to be honest, we didn't have one.
Yeah. So I think we'll start with one, but we have the option to have upwards of 3 eventually up there.
Okay.
We might use one of those as the FBO car that they can use for runway checks and things like that. So after some research, I found an agreement at I believe it was in Buffalo, that they had online, and kind of modified that slightly. I have run this by the city manager and city attorney. I think everybody's on board. I think the way we would operate our system is kind of on the honor system to begin with, until we have staff out there kind of on a full-time basis, where I have lock boxes that we'll probably use the CTAF frequency to gain access to, and we'll have the forms and everything out there in the weather room, so pilots can fill out the form and grab the keys and enjoy our city.
Yeah, I just wanted to we do have that insurance license number required and stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
So I guess it's be one of those things where we'll start it on the honor system, and hopefully everyone obeys the rules that we have set forth, and so we don't lose this privilege, I guess. So.
All right. No, that's a wonderful idea. Anything to help. Yeah.
Yep.
Do we need a motion on that?
Yeah, I think if it's okay with the commission, if you want to recommend that to the city council for final approval, that would be great.
I will move that we receive and forward to the city council a recommendation that we get an airport courtesy car agreement passed. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those against, motion is carried. 5.6, receive an update on the terminal building projects, excuse me.
Mr. Chair, we have a contractor under contract for some flooring upgrades at the terminal building. The first will replace some tile in the front entryway area. And then along with the main FBO office, we'll replace some carpet along with carpet in the pilot's lounge as well. Some of that's getting pretty worn and whatnot. So that's one thing we got going on out there. I believe we should be getting some awnings over the entry doors, hopefully this week, maybe next week, to help us getting rainwater in, especially during storms when it's windy. And as you can see when you walk in, it doesn't look the best. So hopefully that helps with that. And then as far as the Wi-Fi service, we got that up and running at the airport as well. And we upgraded the TV in the pilot's lounge to a smart TV as well. So little bit of extra amenities up there that we haven't had before. And then we do have some smaller projects scheduled for next year too, is more flooring replacements kind of in that hallway between the terminal building and the maintenance hangar and things like that. So trying to stay on top of a 40-year-old building. It's getting time to replace some of these things. So.
All right, thank you. Any other items that need to be brought before the commission? Hearing none, we shall set the next meeting for Tuesday, October 13th, 2020, 4 p.m., or at the call of the chair, pro tem. Yes, pro tem.
Make sure we add that in,
All
Mr.
those
Chair.
all those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye. Meeting is closed.
Thanks, gentlemen.